The smell hit Rodrigo Silva first, burning rubber mixed with hot metal and the acrid smoke of electrical wiring catching fire. Strapped to the undercarriage of a bus doing 70 miles per hour on a Texas highway, he could only watch as flames began licking at the edges of his hiding place, inches from his face. He tried to scream, but 3 hours of freezing wind had stolen his voice. Tried to move, but the chains that held him to the bus's belly allowed no escape. All he could do was turn his head away from the growing fire and pray that anyone, would notice before he became another nameless casualty of the American dream. But to understand how a 28-year-old engineer from Caracas ended up chained beneath a burning bus, you have to go back 6 months, to the day Venezuela finally broke him. It wasn't one thing that made him leave. It was the accumulation of impossibilities. The worthless currency that made his engineering degree meaningless. The empty pharmacy shelves when his mother needed insulin. The night the colectivos came for his neighbor, a fellow engineer who'd criticized the government online. The neighbor was found 3 days later, alive but broken, warning everyone that next time would be worse. Rodrigo had held on longer than most. Pride, maybe, or hope that things would improve. But watching his mother ration insulin, knowing that his skills meant nothing in a country where a month's salary couldn't buy a dozen eggs, that finally did it. He sold everything he owned, kissed his mother goodbye, and joined the river Venezuelans flowing north. The journey through Central America was its own nightmare. Buses when he had money, walking when he didn't, sleeping in migrant shelters when they had space, under bridges when they didn't. By the time he reached the Mexican border town of Piedras Negras, he'd lost 30 pounds and most of his faith in humanity. That's where he met El Tejano, a coyote who specialized in what he called vehicular integration. Not hiding people in cars or trucks, but underneath them, in specially modified compartments that border agents rarely checked. It was dangerous, he admitted, but effective. His success rate was 90%. $10,000. That was the price for becoming human cargo strapped to a bus's undercarriage. Rodrigo had $6,000 left. El Tejano was unmoved by sob stories or promises of future payment. Cash only. Full amount. No exceptions. Desperation makes entrepreneurs of us all. Rodrigo found work at a warehouse, moving boxes for 12 hours a day, washed dishes at night, sold his blood twice a week to a clinic that didn't ask questions, slept in shifts at a 24-hour internet cafe, paying by the hour for a chair and roof. It took 3 months to save the rest. 3 months of watching others cross while he saved every peso. 3 months of his mother's increasingly worried calls, lie about being safe in Mexico City, finding work, planning his legal entry. 3 months of becoming invisible, just another Venezuelan ghost in a border town full of them. When he finally had the money, El Tejano explained the process with the casual efficiency of someone describing a recipe. The bus was a regular commercial line, running from Piedras Negras to San Antonio. The driver was paid off, the border inspector on their payroll. Rodrigo would be secured in a metal cage welded to the undercarriage, hidden behind a spare tire and fuel tank. The crossing would take 4 hours. Uncomfortable, yes. Cold, definitely. But survivable. People had done it dozens of times. The cage was padded, ventilated, tested. All he had to do was endure. Once across, they'd stop at a rest area where associates would free him. By dawn, he'd be on his way to Houston and the restaurant job his cousin had arranged. The night of the crossing, Rodrigo met the others making the same journey. There were 3 of them, a Honduran teenager named Carlos, a Guatemalan woman named Maria, and himself. Each would be secured to different parts of the bus's undercarriage, distributed to avoid detection by weight sensors. The bus sat in a warehouse that smelled of motor oil and fear. El Tejano's men worked with practiced efficiency, sliding under the vehicle on mechanics' creepers, preparing the hidden compartments. Rodrigo watched them attach the metal cage that would be his home for the next 4 hours. It looked like a torture device. Steel bars forming a human-shaped cavity, chains to hold the occupant in place. They gave him a winter coat, motorcycle helmet, and goggles, protection against the wind and road debris. The helmet had a tube for water, though drinking while horizontal and moving at highway speeds would be nearly impossible. They showed him the emergency release, a lever he could pull if something went catastrophically wrong, though using it meant certain capture. Getting into position required contorting his body in ways that made his joints scream. He slid under the bus on a creeper, then had to twist and lift himself into the cage while mechanics guided him. The fit was exact, no room for error or comfort. The chains went across his chest, waist, and legs, holding him flush against the bus's underside. From his position, he could see Maria being secured near the rear axle, her face already tight with fear. Carlos was somewhere near the front, invisible from Rodrigo's angle. Above them, regular passengers would board in an hour, completely unaware of the human cargo beneath their feet. El Tejano himself to the final inspection, checking each chain, each bolt, making sure nothing would rattle or come loose. He reminded them about staying silent no matter what. Border inspections sometimes use mirrors to check undercarriages. Any movement, any sound, meant discovery in federal prison. The engine started, vibrating through Rodrigo's entire body. The cage conducted every mechanical shutter, every piston firing. His teeth chattered despite the helmet. This was just idling. What would highway speeds feel like? They pulled out of the warehouse into the Piedras Negras night. Even at low speeds, the wind was brutal, finding every gap in his clothing. The goggles helped but couldn't stop his eyes from watering. The roar of the engine, inches from his head, made thought impossible. The bus stopped several times, picking up regular passengers. Rodrigo assumed. Each stop was agony, wondering if this was an inspection, if mirrors were being slid underneath, if a shaking from cold would give them away. But each time they continued on. The border checkpoint was unmarked from below, just another stop that lasted longer. Rodrigo pressed himself against the cage, trying to become part of the bus itself. He could hear muffled voices above, footsteps on the floor over his head. His heart hammered, so hard he was sure it would shake the chains. Minutes passed like hours. Then movement again. Acceleration. They'd made it through, but the real torture was just beginning. Highway speed turned the wind into 1,000 knives. Even through the winter coat, cold penetrated to his bones. The helmet protected his head, but trapped the sound of his own panic breathing. Road debris, rocks, sticks, pieces of tire pelted him constantly. The goggles fogged, then cleared, then fogged again with each breath. An hour in, his body started shutting down. Fingers were numb first, then toes. The chains that held him secure now felt like they were cutting through flesh. Every bump in the road drove metal into muscle. He tried shifting position, but the cage allowed no movement. 2 hours in, the shaking started. Uncontrollable, full-body convulsions as hypothermia set in. His jaw clenched so hard, he thought his teeth would shatter. The water tube had frozen. Ice formed on his eyelashes, weighing him down. He couldn't feel his face anymore. 3 hours in, something went wrong with the bus. He smelled it first, the acrid scent of overheating brakes, then saw the glow of hot metal near the rear wheels. The bus was slowing but not stopping, the driver probably unaware of the mechanical failure developing beneath him, or aware, but unwilling to stop with human cargo attached. The glow became smoke. The smoke became flame. Small at first, just flickering orange light near the brake assembly, but fed by highway wind, it grew quickly. Rodrigo watched in horror as fire crept along the undercarriage, following fuel lines and hydraulic fluid. Smoke filled his cage, making breathing even harder. He reached for the emergency release, fingers fumbling with cold and fear, but wouldn't budge, frozen solid, or jammed by road debris. He tried to scream, but only managed to whisper. 3 hours of freezing wind had destroyed his voice. The chains held him perfectly in place as death approached in the form of spreading flame. The fire reached the fuel lines. Not the main tank. That would have been instant death, but the auxiliary lines running along the chassis. They burned like fuses, dripping flaming fuel that splashed inches from his face. The winter coat, his protection against cold, now became a death trap of flammable material. Through the smoke and terror, he saw Maria's cage. She was screaming silently, mouth open in a rictus of horror, watching the same flames approach her position. He couldn't see Carlos, but imagined the teenager facing the same fate. 3 people about to burn alive, while passengers above remained oblivious. The heat fought the cold, creating a special kind of torture. His front side beginning to burn, while his back remained frozen to the metal cage. Smoke filled his lungs, making each breath a struggle. The goggles melted, plastic fusing to skin. This was how he would die, chained under a bus on a Texas highway, burning alive while trying to reach a dishwashing job. Then, miracle or coincidence, the bus began slowing. Not the controlled deceleration of a planned stop, but the shuddering, grinding slowdown of mechanical failure. The driver had finally noticed something wrong. Or maybe the passengers smelled smoke. Either way, they were pulling over. The bus lurched to a stop on the shoulder. Rodrigo could hear commotion above, passengers evacuating, someone shouting about fire. Within moments, people were crouching beside the bus, using phone lights to peer underneath. The first person to see him, a middle-aged white woman, screamed and fell backward. More faces appeared. Shock, horror, disbelief at finding human beings chained beneath a burning bus. Someone ran for a fire extinguisher. Others called 911. A man with a tire iron began attacking the chains, holding Rodrigo, while someone else worked on Maria's cage. The fire extinguisher bought time but couldn't stop the electrical fire spreading through the bus's systems. They had minutes before the whole vehicle went up. The tire iron wasn't working fast enough. Someone produced bolt cutters from a pickup truck, attacking the chains with desperate efficiency. Rodrigo felt the first chain snap, then the second. Hands reached into the cage, pulling him free as the third chain gave way. He collapsed on the asphalt, body convulsing, unable to stand or speak. Someone threw a blanket over his smoking coat. Someone else poured water on his melted goggles, trying to cool the plastic fused to his face. Maria emerged moments later, carried by 2 men, her legs unable to support her. Then Carlos, unconscious but breathing, dragged free just as the bus's tire exploded from heat. They lay on the shoulder like casualties of war, while good Samaritans tried to help and others filmed with their phones. The fire department arrived first, then police, then border patrol. The humanitarian crisis overrode immigration law, at least temporarily. Paramedics treated burns, hypothermia, smoke inhalation. Rodrigo drifted in and out of consciousness, aware of movement lights, professional voices discussing the horror of what they'd found. He woke in a hospital room, handcuffed to the bed. Bandages covered his face where the goggles had melted. IVs dripped fluids into his dehydrated body. A border patrol agent sat in the corner, playing on his phone, waiting for Rodrigo to be well enough to deport. The story made headlines for a day. 3 migrants found chained beneath burning bus. Outrage and finger-pointing followed. The bus company claimed ignorance. The driver disappeared. El Tejano's operation vanished overnight. Politicians used it as evidence for their preferred immigration policies. But for Rodrigo, the headlines meant nothing. He lay in that hospital bed, feeling the phantom sensation of chains across his chest, smelling smoke that wasn't there, hearing the roar of an engine inches from his head. The nurses were kind, speaking soft Spanish, treating him like a patient rather than a criminal. But he knew what came next. The deportation proceedings were swift. His asylum claim, valid as it might be, was undermined by the manner of entry. Chaining yourself to a burning bus didn't inspire judicial sympathy. Within 2 weeks of the fire, he was on a plane back to Caracas, bandages still on his face, memories seared deeper than any physical scar. His mother cried when she saw him, cried for the burns, for the failure, for the money lost, for the dreams destroyed. He told her it was okay, that he was alive, that they would find another way, but they both knew better. Some chances you only get once. Some failures mark you forever. He found work eventually, not engineering. His absence had been noted by the wrong people, but fixing computers for those who could pay in dollars, a gray market existence that kept them fed. The burns healed, leaving pink patches where the goggles had been. The other scars, invisible ones, remained raw. Sometimes he'd wake gasping, feeling smoke in his lungs, flames approaching while he lay helpless. His mother would hold him, this grown man reduced to childhood terrors, whispering that he was safe. But safety was relative in a country falling apart, and part of him was still chained beneath that bus, watching death approach in the form of spreading fire. The others haunted him too. Maria, who'd screamed silently as flames approached. Carlos, who'd been unconscious when they pulled him free. Had they been deported too? Had they tried again? Or were they, like him, forever marked by those hours beneath the bus? He met others who'd failed to cross. Venezuelans were everywhere now, millions scattered across the continent, each carrying stories of attempted journeys. Some had walked through jungles, others hidden in containers, all risking everything for a chance at stability. His story of the burning bus usually won the competition for most horrific attempt, but it wasn't a competition anyone wanted to win. Years passed. The situation in Venezuela worsened, then stabilized at a level of manageable catastrophe. Rodrigo built his computer repair business, sent his mother for medical care in Colombia when needed, learned to live with the memories. The pink scars on his face faded but never disappeared, a daily reminder in the mirror. He thought sometimes about the Americans who'd saved him, the woman who'd screamed upon seeing him, the man with the tire iron desperately attacking his chains, the one with bolt cutters who'd freed him just in time. They'd risked their own safety to pull strangers from beneath a burning bus. No questions about legality, just human response to human suffering. That memory competed with the other, of being cargo, of being chained like an animal, of watching death approach while unable to move or scream. America was both things, maybe the place that created conditions for such desperation, and the place where ordinary people would risk themselves to save strangers. His engineering mind analyzed the failure points, the overheated brakes, the frozen emergency release, the voice destroyed by cold. So many things that went wrong, any one which could have been fatal, but also the coincidences that saved them. The mechanical failure forcing a stop, the good Samaritans with exactly the right tools, the fire department arriving just in time. Life balanced on such thin margins. Seconds between salvation and death. Inches between flames and flesh. The border between countries was nothing compared to the border between breathing and not breathing, between making it and becoming another statistics. His name was Rodrigo Silva. He'd paid $10,000 to be chained beneath a bus crossing the Texas border. When it caught fire, he couldn't scream because 3 hours of freezing wind had stolen his voice. He survived because strangers chose to save him rather than film his death. He carried all of it now, the chains, the smoke, the silence, the salvation. Some borders, once crossed, leave marks that never fade. Some fires, once survived, burn forever in memory. He'd tried to reach America, and found only that desperation has a price higher than money, and sometimes you pay in ways that mark you forever. The bus was gone, scrapped after the fire. El Tejano had disappeared into borderland's shadows. The good Samaritans had returned to their lives. But Rodrigo remained, caught between the country that broke him and the country that burned him. Proof that sometimes the American dream becomes a nightmare of smoke and chains and silent screams in the Texas night.